What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with Bleacher Report. I hope that week 5 treated you well and you did not suffer from all of those crazy injuries. But if you did, that's okay because we got you covered. Today, we are talking sleeper fantasy trade targets. We are looking for guys outside of the typical superstar trade targets. Think of this as more of your underrated targets here. I've got a nice mix here of guys that you can target in shallow leagues and deeper leagues as well, that you can look at with all of the injuries going on and all of the random players going off here. As always, guys, jump in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your questions. And let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to start off right here with Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid had a shockingly little surprising turnaround here compared to his first couple of seasons here. This week, 6 of 6 in terms of receptions, 108 yards. He is the tight end 2 overall on the season and tight end 3 in average fantasy points per game. He is thriving. And it's going overlooked a little bit here because, again, when it comes to this Buffalo offense, it's Josh Allen and James Cook has been fantastic. But when it comes to the pass game, we often think of these guys as not having a ton of upside, right? Because Josh Allen tends to spread the ball around because he has such incredible upside on the ground. He doesn't always need to throw for aggressively high volume depending on the matchup here. So often when we're looking at this with Dalton Kincaid, there's a little bit of skepticism naturally baked in there. He doesn't have the volume of guys like Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson. He makes up for it in yardage, though. And because of that perception, he's a nice little trade target here that goes overlooked, right? If you tried to trade for Trey McBride, you're going to pay top dollar, despite the fact that Dalton Kincaid is actually outperforming him. When we look at him and the numbers that he's putting up and the way that he is thriving off of yardage, he has 6 receptions over 20 yards. He is a big play asset at tight end. He has an ADOT that is typically higher than other tight ends that we see as well. And again, when we look at the target share, despite the fact that there's not a ton of targets in this offense, there's enough. And the fact that Dalton Kincaid is essentially pulling nearly dead even with Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir is highly impressive here. We could easily, as we see this upside continue for Kincaid, he could realistically become the automatic first look in this offense here. So when we're looking at Kincaid, and again, the shift for him, we can also compare it to last season to kind of buy into it even more. Red zone usage is very key here. Last season, he only had 10 targets throughout the entire season in the red zone. Thus far, through 5 games, he is already halfway to that number, well exceeding his production here. We've seen a noticeable decrease in presence of Dawson Knox here. So it's clear we've got one clear tight end 1 here. And as the season has progressed, he looks like he is the more reliable guy here. Going to the chat here real quick from Klein, is Dalton the go-to guy or is it Khalil Shakir? Will he get more targets? So when we look at the target share, Dalton Kincaid has 24 on the year and Shakir has 29 on the year. Literally just a 5 target discrepancy there. It seems bigger than that because when we look at Shakir, sometimes he has those games where he can reach that double-digit level, but Kincaid has actually been more consistent. And as we continue forward, we've also got the touchdown usage for him. I feel like we might see a tilt and an increase there. So the target share, not concerned. He is right there behind Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. So ultimately, when we look at the production that he's making, I do think that Kincaid can realistically become the go-to look in this offense. He's this close to being it, and he's looked fantastic. Josh Allen is clearly tilting towards him. I think we might see, as the season progresses, maybe halfway through here, so we kind of near that, might see that ultimate jump for him. From Travs Sherry, would you trade Pitts or Kincaid? If I was looking to get rid of one, it would be Pitts. For me, with Kincaid, for selling him, I don't know if you're going to get the bargain that you want out of it in terms of that upside. Pitts, obviously, when we're looking at him, he has had improvement here this year. We've had a lack of production from Darnell Mooney here, so he is pacing definitely behind Drake London, but they do throw for more in that offense there. So if I'm looking to get rid of one that I think I still get good value out of, it would be Pitts that I would get rid of, and I feel more comfortable leaning into keeping Kincaid. Let's go on to the next player here. It is Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton, this is more of a deeper league trade target because we like to mix it up, right, for you guys. When we're looking at Torrey Horton, rookie who has popped really well here early, we got to pay attention to the level of production that he's had. Horton's production has been sneaky, right? Because it's not massive production. It's not as if he's getting out there and having a Emeka Egbuka numbers, right? Of course, no rookie is technically, going to be having those numbers right now. But when we look at Torrey Horton, he's made his stamp clear on this offense. He's hovering around 50% of snaps. So that tells us, one, there's still a higher ceiling that we can get to here. And really the only barrier between him and that higher level of production here is Cooper Kupp. And when we're looking at Cooper Kupp, while he is still definitely the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense in terms of his presence on the field, snaps, routes run, the guy that we've been looking at in the red zone from Seattle's perspective, it's been Torrey Horton and JSN. Obviously, JSN the dominating factor there, but Torrey Horton has 3 touchdowns on the season there with just 9 receptions. That tells you that they are very intentional about this usage for him. Even though he is on the field in a limited capacity here, they see him as a big playmaker that they want to get involved. Cooper Kupp has no touchdowns on the year. So while volume has been steady, the ceiling is lacking. And as we've seen with Cooper Kupp over the past several years, obviously, he has not been at that level of his wide receiver 1 overall season. That was a long time ago, and we haven't seen him come even close to that. He's an older receiver, mid-30s, early 30s. I won't give it to him. He's early 30s there. But we feel like every season we see a clear injury, a wall, progression, some kind of regression for him. So I think he's kind of where he is in terms of age. And as we move forward here, Horton has been absolutely electric. The reality of him surpassing in terms of production Cooper Kupp is very, very realistic. And if anything were to happen to Cooper Kupp, as he has dealt with multiple injuries over the past several seasons, Torrey Horton would absolutely be shooting up the rankings, playing opposite of JSN here. So again, not somebody who we are absolutely starting right now. No, in deeper leagues, for sure, you might be turning to him. But again, this is a guy that you can add, trade for, and who can potentially transition to a higher workload moving forward here. And again, while the volume hasn't been massive, 3 of his 5 games have had double-digit fantasy points in PPR. So despite being on the field about 50% of snaps, he actually has had a decent little floor there. Now, occasionally the floor is 0, but he is getting us usable production there. And you can't ask for more of a rookie. So let's jump to the chat real quick here before we move on to the next player. From K. Morrow, Malik Washington or Horton, rest of season. I think I would go with Torrey Horton. Reasoning here, and granted, not going to be quick to judge Malik Washington because there is still transition that this offense can make, right? But we have a little problem there. What I wanted to see out of Malik Washington without Tyreek Hill is increased usage downfield. I wanted that ADOT to jump because it was below 5, and I'm sure I have actually did not check on his ADOT specifically after this week, but considering that he had 0 yards, I believe that ADOT probably went down there. His usage is just kind of gimmicky right now. He's capable of playing downfield, and I wish that Mike McDaniel would kind of switch things up for him, but if he's not going to do that as a coach and use him properly, and it seems like he's, very clear in terms of progressing Darren Waller forward. Unfortunately, Malik Washington's upside is going to be a little bit limited there. So while he will play more snaps than Torrey Horton does have the more upside there, particularly with the usage that he has. From Chris Fargo, will Kamara get going even though Miller is getting more work? My hope there, and unfortunately, I kind of don't think that he is going to get going further beyond what we have right here. My hope for Kamara, and I think I talked about him as a buy low candidate last week. The hope there for Kamara is that we get towards the end of the NFL trade deadline and we see Kamara moved. We've got a lot of injuries going on, teams that need running backs here. So perhaps, now granted, New Orleans did get their first win, but realistically, they're not competing, right? So perhaps we see Kamara shipped off and they try to get some value out of him. That's the hope there, because unfortunately, Miller is definitely a presence that is sticking around. This past game against Tampa Bay, against the New York Giants, it was competitive, a game that they won. So it doesn't take blowout games for him to have that presence there. They definitely are using him as a 1B to Kamara, unfortunately. From Andrew Andrew Niederman, my bad on that one. Time to give up on Jacoby Myers. Yeah, it is. And let me actually use that as the perfect transition to our next player that we are going to talk about. It is Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker is an excellent trade target right now because, as Andrew just said, it might be time to give up on Jacoby Myers because is he actually really the wide receiver one of this Raiders offense? He's hanging on by a thread, but moving forward, it seems like Trey Tucker is taking over here. For right now, Myers is the target leader here, but he has done absolutely nothing with it. Outside of week one, his highest yardage in a game is 68. And then in week 1 and 2, he did have double-digit targets. Now he is down to 4 to 6 targets per game. That is a major issue here, and he has no touchdowns. Trey Tucker has a clearly higher ceiling here. And the thing that we love about Trey Tucker here is that he's been able to produce regardless of the matchup here, whether it is a blowout, whether it is a close game, whether there is Brock Bowers or not. He's at least giving us usable fantasy production. Myers is really struggling to get there and really have that breakout performance since that week one production that he had. And this week in particular is kind of maybe the telltale sign there. We had the absence of Brock Bowers. That in theory should have picked up volume for Jacoby Myers. That didn't happen, unfortunately. We had a layup matchup previously against Chicago. Jacoby Myers didn't do anything with that. At this point, when you look at the snap counts between Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker, they are dead even, which means they are both playing in 2 wide receiver sets. They see Trey Tucker as generally on par with Jacoby Myers. And what makes the matter worse there for Jacoby Myers and better for Trey Tucker there is that the Raiders aren't treating them different in terms of usage, but Geno Smith is treating them very different. Geno Smith clearly loves Trey Tucker. It's a big target that he loves to hit downfield there. And Tucker is getting some varied usage as well here. As we move forward and look at the stats here, I mean, they're eye-popping. And yeah, some of that came in that one big, massive performance here. But he has had steady production. Occasionally the floor is a little bit low, right? But overall, he has truly been just fantastic in terms of the upside that he offers, and now particularly showing maybe a decent little floor there for us. So I do like this transition from Jacoby Myers to Trey Tucker. Let's move on to another wide receiver too that is pushing his way up. It is Troy Franklin. Now, unlike Trey Tucker, who was pushing for the wide receiver one spot there, Troy Franklin is not going to push Courtland Sutton out of that number one spot here. But at this point, it is extremely clear that Troy Franklin is the wide receiver 2 for the Broncos. Between Franklin, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Franklin has consistently had the highest snap count between all 3 of them, right? Consistent highest snap count. Targets have been very consistent here. Now, again, it's all behind Courtland Sutton, right? He is the wide receiver 1 there, and that's not going to change. But the Broncos offense does function quite better than the Raiders offense at this point. And the wide receiver 2, opposite of Courtland Sutton, does have fantasy value here. And again, when we're looking at the targets, though, the upside is definitely leaning more towards Sutton. Target distribution between the 2 is not that high. Sutton has 37 targets on the year. Franklin has 32. He's a prominent part of that offense. We want to invest in that Broncos offense. It's hard to do with Courtland Sutton, right? But we want to invest in this offense. And if we look at Troy Franklin, that's an easy path in. And we want to invest in this offense because the Broncos are about to hit a nice little upswing, if you will, in terms of the matchups and potential that they have. And Bo Nix obviously started off the season rough. We were very concerned about him, but he has pulled it together over the past couple of games. So the rough start, okay, we pulled it together here. Offense is looking better. Run game looks good. As a whole, this is a good situation for us to be looking at. The Broncos have upcoming the Jets, the Giants, Dallas. Those are 3 matchups that you absolutely want to target. Franklin has showcased an excellent ceiling. We saw it in week 2 when he had 8 receptions on 9 targets, 89 yards, and a touchdown. He's also shown a very solid floor because he's had 3 games between 8 and 9 fantasy points, just 1 per performance against the Chargers. That's understandable there. Franklin is young. He's a second-year player, and often when we look at Sean Payton, often it takes a year to ingratiate yourself into his good graces. Troy Franklin has got that now. He's a wide receiver 2 here that could really grow in this role, and it could pay off as we move forward and the Broncos offense continues to progress forward in their competency as well. Let's go to the chat here real quick from CW37. Time to give up on Jamison Williams. This is a painful question. No, I don't think it's time to give up on Jamison Williams. Now, we would be remiss to not realize the floor is just disgustingly low, right? And unfortunately, it feels like this offense has just pushed aggressively into Amon-Ra St. Brown, and everyone else is getting left in the dust. Now, we have seen Sam Laporta get an uptick, but even he has often been inconsistent as well. Strong week one, strong performance here, and then in between, very ugly and mediocre here. So unfortunately, giving up on Jamison Williams completely, I can't do that because, again, the talent is insane there, but putting him on our bench, yeah, 100%. We can unfortunately move him further back in rankings to where he's more of a risky flex play that is matchup dependent here. From Jomez Fashiz, is Krosky Merritt going to get all the work, or is it still a timeshare? I would still slightly proceed with caution in terms of it being a timeshare. Ultimately, backfields can be a little bit, coaching staffs can be a little bit finicky in terms of their backfields on a week-to-week basis. Like we saw with Houston, we would have thought after that breakout performance from Woody Marks that we would have seen the progression forward with Woody Marks. We did not get that in the way that we thought. So technically speaking, even after this awesome performance by JCM, we could still see more of a committee, but I feel more comfortable with him now after this for sure. Especially because we did see more usage in the receiving game. And I think that's key is if they start to trust him as a pass catcher, as a pass blocker here, we can push forward towards that 3-down role. So we're progressing in the right way with him. He's moving up to more of a reliable RB2 that we can throw in there and trust because at the very least, we know he has a massive ceiling there. From Knowles 85, what happened to Woody Marks? Perfect. What happened to Woody Marks this weekend? I thought he was the hot ticket. So this was a weird game. And I live in Houston. So had been listening to like a local sports show interview of D'Amico Ryans. I feel like they were using this as an experiment, right? Because Baltimore's defense was bad, right? And so I think they were still trying to work through that backfield because we saw increased snaps for Dameon Pierce too. So it was just kind of a weird situation where you're sitting there kind of like, what is the goal here? I feel like it was just an excellent matchup where they just tried a little bit of everything, and the big touchdown did go to Nick Chubb. We still got good amount of snaps for Woody Marks. It wasn't as if he was reduced and disappeared. He was still there. He just didn't get those advantageous touches, unfortunately. From Corey Wynn, hold Ollie Gordon in Samson or wait longer. I would not hold on Samson. I will hold on Ollie Gordon. Now, again, at some point, perhaps Jalen Wright coming back can affect things, but in terms of the preseason usage, it seemed pretty clear that Ollie Gordon had progressed forward over Jalen Wright. So I feel pretty confident that Gordon is still the direct handcuff there with Achane. And if he were to come into that role, it would be a very high upside opportunity. Now, Samson, on the other hand, has the issue of he's not getting usage at all, right? That pass role that we thought that he might have opposite of Quinshon Judkins, they're keeping Judkins on the field for a decent amount and giving him some receptions. But at the same time, we're getting Jerome Ford aggressively in that pass role. So unfortunately for Samson, there's a couple of things that have to happen for them for him to get that opportunity. So Samson, we can move on from, sadly. It's more akin to a Caleb Johnson situation, except Samson didn't really do anything to earn the lack of usage there. It's just that Judkins has been so fantastic. It's amazing. I wish he was a trade target, but unfortunately that value has skyrocketed and now he is a weekly top 12 option. Let's move on to our number 5 here. Our number 5 here for a trade target is Michael Pittman Jr. I'm not going to lie, guys, he is one of my favorite here. I am a Michael Pittman Jr. stan, and I've been waiting for this moment of his greatness ascending to a true wide receiver 1 here. Thank you, Daniel Jones, for bringing us wide receiver 1 season for Michael Pittman. But that's why he's a trade target, because Pittman often goes overlooked. He's not looked at as a traditional wide receiver 1. We've always seen people try to say, okay, no, it'll be Josh Downs that comes in. It'll be AD Mitchell that comes in. Alec Pierce is making a push. But ultimately, Pittman has weathered the storm, and he is the clear wide receiver 1 there. Now, he does have Tyler Warren in tandem there, who's looked fantastic, right? But volume is still aggressively favoring Pittman, and Daniel Jones has looked fantastic. Now, we do get the discount in terms of trading for Michael Pittman because we've got that Daniel Jones discount in terms of people ultimately not trusting Indianapolis, not trusting Daniel Jones, and really not trusting Michael Pittman, although he does warrant it. But again, when we look at this Colts offense and the way that they're moving, we want to invest into it. You cannot invest to Jonathan Taylor. It's not physically possible. The price is astronomical. You cannot invest into Tyler Warren because you're going to have to pay up aggressively. He is literally dominating and being the sleeper tight end one of the season here. So the mid-priced option, the low buy here, is actually Michael Pittman, despite the fact that he has been incredibly reliable here. Touchdowns have finally come to him. Again, when we've looked at Pittman, that's really been, aside from, poor quarterback play, touchdowns have always been the issue pulling him down there. Most seasons, I think the max in a season a long time ago, like a sophomore season, was 6 touchdowns. Most season he gets 4 touchdowns. He has already achieved that. So we are already it's week 5 that we've gone through, and we're already at the ceiling for Michael Pittman here. That is actually crazy here. Daniel Jones is really feeding him. And even in tough matchups, right? Like Denver was a tough matchup. He still got 8 fantasy points, even though Daniel Jones was looking elsewhere trying to avoid Patrick Surtain. Pittman's floor is incredibly safe. He's shown a good ceiling there, touchdown equity. In terms of a guy with legitimate weekly wide receiver 1 upside that you can buy at a low end wide receiver 2 pricing, you can't ask for more here with Michael Pittman. Moving on to the chat here. Let's do a quick chat here and then I'll go on to our next one here. What about Rico Dowdle? So we got an update maybe like 30 minutes ago, really, that Dowdle is, that Chuba Hubbard is listed as day-to-day. And it seemed like he was relatively close to playing, and then there was like a slight setback, and they ultimately held him out there. So if he's on the more day-to-day end with Dowdle, the problem is that if we trade for him, we may not be able to use him this week. The upside is insanely high. But when Chuba Hubbard comes back, he is still the RB1. At best, we could hope for a committee, but they traditionally have not operated in that sense ever since they let Chuba Hubbard take over, and he's been fine, right? He just hasn't had that massive upside game, and this was just the perfect alignment of Rico Dowdle going off here. So you can acquire him. If you have Chuba Hubbard, I would absolutely acquire him 100%. But I will say that if you do try to trade for him right now, the risk here is that Chuba comes back this week and you've just traded for a handcuff, a high-end handcuff, excellent handcuff, right? But still just a handcuff there. From Jomez, Fashiz, Pittman is definitely a big target, and that helps that JT is in that backfield and Warren is out there. But he does tend to fall off at the end of the year. Do you think that'll happen? So he dealt with injuries last season, and the injuries nagged for him. So he was playing through that injury, and I think that kind of attributes to the fall off. We also get into the continued unfortunate situation that Indianapolis has faced year after year. Cross our fingers we don't have to deal with this year, and Daniel Jones just continues to move forward as is. But a lot of that back half fall off is often the inconsistency of quarterbacks and flipping in the back half of the season too. So I don't think the back half issue is him as much as it has been the quarterback situation and the fact that last year he was playing through a bad back injury that really he should have just, like, I don't know, stopped and not played and rested. Let's move on to our number 6 here. Number 6 here is Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason as a trade target here. A lot of people might be scared and trying to sell off Jordan Mason because of the obviously anticipated return at some point. We don't have a timeline, right? But at some point, we should get Aaron Jones back. And that does make people feel like they're on a limited time frame with Jordan Mason. So it's a good buy low opportunity here. After the Vikings week 1 game, I said the best path forward for the Vikings was to hand the reins over to Jordan Mason and use Aaron Jones primarily from a receiving standpoint. Mason has looked decisively better as an early down back and a goal line back than Aaron Jones. And again, that's not the surprise. Aaron Jones has really teetered off here as he's gotten a little bit older, unfortunately. Workload has piled up and he's just become rather ineffective at the goal line, particularly last year, struggled significantly at the goal line. So knowing that the Vikings were very vocal about the fact that they wanted a split backfield, that they wanted a 50-50 backfield with Jordan Mason specifically with the old early down work and the goal line carries, and then change of pace, the receiving, and still a little bit of, work on the ground clearly for Aaron Jones. But they wanted that split backfield here. So Jordan Mason is not going away when Aaron Jones returns. If anything, Jones is the one that I am concerned about here, just because Mason has been the clear better back on the ground here. Again, I don't think it'll be the case that we'll see a massive reduction in Mason's workload and he'll retain that early down back and be a solid RB2 rest of season. And when we look at the upcoming schedule here, it's mixed here. We've got some tougher matchups here after their bye week. We've got which could potentially when we get Aaron Jones back, but we've got Philadelphia is a strong matchup. But then we go to LA Chargers defense has been struggling. Detroit's defense has been a little bit vulnerable against the run and dealing with injuries. And then they get into a real nice spot there with Baltimore, Chicago, and Green Bay. Excellent matchups on the ground here. So Jordan Mason, things are going to be looking up, especially after last week, which was a little bit of a down week and a difficult matchup for him. Moving on to the next player here, our number 7 player to trade for is Rachaad White. Now, we talked about Rico Dowdle, and I said why Rico Dowdle was not a trade target because Chuba Hubbard is on a day-to-day schedule for his injury, right? Bucky Irving is week to week. And unfortunately, we found out that it's not just the foot sprain that he's dealing with. He is also dealing with a shoulder injury. So we're talking about multiple injuries, a player listed as week to week. So perhaps somebody is looking to capitalize and trade off Rachaad White because they either don't need him or they need to upgrade another position. If you need a running back right now that has true RB1 upside, regardless of what the matchup here is, and we should get it for multiple weeks, it is in fact Rachaad White that you can target here, because we've got a very known situation here with him. With all of the injuries going on here, again, we're in a weird spot here, and we've got the ambiguity around Bucky Irving's injury and his timeline here. But when it comes to Rachaad White, we know exactly what to expect. He has been the starting running back before Bucky Irving arrived and took that role away there. Sean Tucker is cool, but he's not a threat to him. We've seen Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving for several years together now, and it's always been Rachaad White that has played above him. White is the clear RB1 here, and while he is not the most effective back on the ground. That is why he lost the job to Bucky Irving in the first place. Lack of efficiency on the ground, unfortunately. But he's got receiving upside. That is key. And the fact that we were able to get this level of performance out of him in this matchup here with a very tough Seattle defense, and he was able to get us 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. One says that despite his inefficiencies, Tampa Bay does trust him at the goal line. And 2, despite the fact that he will probably be a little bit lower than average in yards per carry, we're still going to ultimately get good production out of him. Plus, we got that receiving upside, but it gets even better. If you need him right now, we have incredibly soft matchups coming up here for Rachaad White for Tampa Bay from a run perspective. San Francisco's defense has not been the same without Nick Bosa. They have been insanely vulnerable to the ground, giving up big games to literally everybody. And then we have New Orleans defense, another team that is very vulnerable to the run as well. Detroit is in between those 2 matchups. But again, I just talked about Detroit being vulnerable to the run. They've been giving up touchdowns at a decent amount of yardage as well. So these are good matchups moving forward for Rachaad White over this little time period that we should be without Bucky Irving. They have a week 9 bye, so logically, there's a kind of easy prediction there that we might not see Bucky Irving until after the bye week there if he's on a week-to-week injury basis right now. Moving on to the chat here before we close things out from John 87 Garcia. Traded Cook for Scadaboo and Ibuka. Thoughts? I don't mind it. I think Ibuka is real. Obviously, James Cook, despite last night was not the ideal performance, right? But James Cook has been fantastic, and he showcased that extreme upside on the ground in terms of rushing touchdowns that he had last year, leading the league, tied for leading the league. Scadaboo is the RB1 there. We've got Tyrone Tracy dealing with an injury. He's not as efficient as we want him to be, but he does have receiving upside here. So I'm fine with that. Ibuka has looked fantastic. It's very realistic that he could just be the wide receiver 1 moving forward, especially with the way that Baker clearly loves him. From Empire 210, should I trade for Derrick Henry or wait until Lamar Jackson come back? Derrick Henry is a trade candidate for me. Yes. Now, granted, if you have a losing record, don't do that because we're probably going to continue to get mediocre production from Derrick Henry. But if you're a winning record team, you are tracking for the playoffs, you feel good about it right now, yes, trade for Derrick Henry. The schedule for the Ravens after the bye week. So we'll assume that, Lamar Jackson probably being held until after the bye week. The schedule for the Ravens after the bye week, absolutely insane. Very easy in terms of soft rushing matchups and games where, despite the fact that the Ravens defense is going to stay terrible, they will at least be able to competitively compete there and keep the game close. So Derrick Henry will be a strong candidate to have a massive uptick in production rest of season there. So yes, Derrick Henry is one of my favorite buy lows right now, actually. From Corey Wynn, worth rostering both Pollard and Tajay Spears. No, my preference is not to. Unfortunately, I don't feel like now Pollard did get the touchdown. That was cool. Um, and we did see Cam Ward have an excellent final drive there that showed some promise here. So there's some promise maybe coming as we get into hopefully some softer matchups here. But ultimately, I feel like you're kind of tying yourself down there. I might, try to trade, I don't know if you can trade both of them off, but maybe try to trade Pollard off, especially since he had the touchdown there. We are going to see increased usage for Tajay Spears, but ultimately kind of more so a handcuff there. So you tying up your roster a little bit with both of them. JC Conticelli. Will Calvin Austin keep getting targets? So we got to monitor the injury report. So yes, he will. He's the clear wide receiver 2 in that offense. They do not like or trust any other wide receivers. So sorry, Roman Wilson, who I love, but unfortunately it's not happening. But you do have to monitor the injury because Calvin Austin got a shoulder injury before the bye week. So technically, bye weeks, we don't get injury updates, so we don't know where he is. But yes, I feel positively about Calvin Austin moving forward. From Sacktown 916 Kings, who is Hampton's backup RB? Should I target him? So we've got a wee bit of an issue there that we do not know ultimately if they're going to move forward with Hassan Haskins or with Kamani Vidal. In theory, Haskins should get the early down work, but I feel like it could be another situation similar to Arizona because Kamani Vidal was inactive for the first, several games of the season, but that is because he did not have a role on special teams. Same exact deal with Michael Carter, where you're inactive because you don't have a special teams role, not because you can't be the lead back if injuries do happen. So at this point, I think they're both worth a grab here. It's just a matter of the Chargers coaching staff giving us a little tip off there in terms of how they plan to use the backfield. My lean is kind of Haskins a little bit because of the rapport that he has there with Harbaugh. But man, this one is one that might throw us for a loop similar to Arizona there. But that wraps things. I wish I could have answered that like more distinctly, but we need to hear from the coaching staff on that one, and probably after they determine the timeline on Omari and Hampton there. But that wraps things up, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure that you've got your notifications on because, as we've seen, it's just a plethora of injuries and news coming out constantly. So make sure you've got your Bleacher Report notifications on because we are in the thick of it, right? I'll be here with you continued every single week to help bring you fantasy advice to help you win your league. You find me across all social media platforms at It's Terra Time. Other than that, have a fantastic week. Good luck with your lineups, and I will talk to you again next week.